15 Sinister Reddit stories revealed, haunted encounters that will keep you up all night. The chill gripping Maplewood was more than just the fall air, it was the creeping dread that seeped through Sarah's walls. At 32, she navigated her fair share of nightmares, but nothing matched the growing horror that nestled next door. A perfect family on the surface, the Johnsons had lured her in with their sweet smiles and pristine lawn, but late-night gatherings dripped with malevolence. Flickering candlelight danced behind their fence, and the sickeningly sweet scent of incense twisted into the night, cloying and disgusting. Every night, the whispers grew louder, and the chants echoed in her ears like a sinister lullaby, tempting her to join their rituals. Sarah's breath quickened as she drew Ellie close during their evening walks. "Could you hear them?" Ellie asked one night, her innocent eyes wide with fear. "They're calling me." The little girl's imagination often danced with darkness, but Sarah recognized that something far more sinister was unfolding. But when the Johnsons' joyous gatherings morphed into terror-filled screams that shattered the stillness, doubt sprouted like weeds in her mind. She dismissed her friend's concern, but now even the kind soup lady who dropped by for dinner looked at her like she was 3 fries short of a happy meal. "Everything's fine, right?" They chuckled nervously. "No, it was not fine. Mommy, they don't want me to leave," Ellie whispered one morning, deep shadows lining her face. Panic surged through Sarah's chest like an electric pulse. She needed to protect her daughter, yet everywhere she turned, whispers and judgment rained down, dismissing her panic as paranoia. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As the crescent moon hung heavy in the sky, Sarah felt the weight of dread more than ever. Barefoot, she tiptoed into the night, heart drumming loudly in her chest as she crept toward the Johnsons' backyard. Shadows danced, and her stomach twisted in knots. There it was, the terrifying scene before her, the family encircling a pit that pulsed with a strange, dark glow. Ritualistic garb adorned their bodies, as guttural voices erupted into the air like curses. Terror clamped down around her throat. There, standing among them, was Ellie, entranced and motionless, face devoid of familiarity. "Mommy, they need me." Ellie's vacant eyes bore into her soul. The sheer horror rendered Sarah frozen, the ground trembling beneath her feet, pulling her into the abyss of despair. The danger she soon realized was tangible and stark, stripping away the thin veil of suburban safety she once cherished. She could feel the darkness thickening, ready to swallow them whole, and time was running out. Would she be able to save her daughter? Or would their lives become just another haunted tale whispered in the dark? Sarah's heart raced as she stumbled back, trying to comprehend the nightmarish scene unfolding before her. The pit pulsed with an unnatural light, lighting up the Johnsons' faces in grotesque relief. They moved in unison, an eerie dance, their chants rising in pitch, drawing Ellie in deeper, trapping her in a deadly embrace of darkness. "Ellie!" Sarah managed to whisper, her voice barely a breath amidst the cacophony. She took a tentative step forward, almost choking on the thick, toxic air. The smell, it was no longer just incense, but something ancient and putrid, like burning flesh. It clawed at her insides, urging her to retch, but she couldn't take her eyes off Ellie, her little girl lost among the shadows. An eruption of laughter ripped through the night, echoing in an unsettling chorus that seared itself into Sarah's mind. The Johnsons turned their gaze toward her, eyes gleaming with a hunger she couldn't begin to understand. They welcomed her presence, their smiles stretching too wide, revealing teeth like sharp daggers. "Join us, Sarah. Join the family," they called, the mocking invitation wrapping around her like a serpent, squeezing tightly. But there was no warmth in their words, only an icy command cloaked in false cheer. "No." Her voice broke, a cry of defiance against the encroaching madness. She lunged toward Ellie, pushing past the shaking fear, desperate for a chance to break the spell. "Ellie, come to me," she commanded, reaching out with trembling hands. Ellie's eyes flickered for a moment, a spark of recognition as she tilted her head, almost as if awakening from a deep slumber. "Mommy," the soft whisper sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, flooding her heart with a mix of hope and dread. But before she could close the distance, the Johnsons' laughter deepened, reverberating through the air like thunder. "Too late, Sarah. She's one of us now." A hand shot out from the group, grabbing Ellie's wrist like a vice. Panic ignited in Sarah's chest, a firestorm threatening to engulf her. The world around her spun, shadows twisting and slithering, closing in. She could feel it now, the pull of the pit, the seductive danger that seemed to breathe and dance. "Leave her alone!" Sarah screamed, a primal scream that surged from the depths of her fear. Adrenaline shot through her veins, wings spread wide as she dove toward Ellie. But as if the air were slathered in syrup, her movements felt slow and cumbersome, the pit's energy dragging her back with each step. She didn't even realize she was crying until she tasted the salty tears dripping down her cheeks. Eyes wide, focused on Ellie, she lunged forward again, only to be met with a force that sent her sprawling to the ground. "Join us." "Forever," came the haunting refrain from the Johnsons, low and insistent, wrapping around her mind like a noose. The pit's glow brightened, throbbing like a heartbeat, ready to consume. Sarah clawed at the grass, wrestling with the terror enveloping her, struggling to get up. She could hear Ellie's giggles puncturing the tension, the sound rich with sinister undertones. The little girl was gone, her innocence replaced by something darker. Then, in a sudden flash, the truth pierced through the haze. "This isn't just a game," she gasped in realization, heart pounding. The Johnsons weren't inviting her in, they were gathering fuel for something far worse than she could ever imagine. "Help me!" Ellie's voice pierced through the chaos like a knife, but it was laced with a terrible clarity that made Sarah shudder. "They won't let me go." The pit erupted with brilliance, each heartbeat echoing louder and louder until it resonated through the ground beneath her, urging the overall darkness forward. Time slammed shut. Sarah clamped her eyes shut, trying to shut out the horror around her. But every breath, every word, and every whisper of the Johnson family continued to claw at her sanity. What had drawn them? What fate awaited Ellie? The darkness twisted tighter, the air buzzing with unholy anticipation. In that moment of despair, Sarah felt an invisible spectral hand reach for her, teasing her with promises of protection even as it radiated coldness. "Take her." A voice beckoned. It wasn't the Johnsons. But who was it? The world around her blurred as she felt herself slipping away. Would she be consumed by the very darkness she feared? Or would she fight to reclaim her daughter from the awakening nightmare? With a scream trapped in her throat, she prepared for one last desperate attempt. Then the ground trembled beneath her feet. As the earth opened up once more, Sarah realized the terror was only beginning. "Get ready," the air whispered, "for the reckoning." The earth split open, swallowing the last remnants of Sarah's hope. Plummeting into darkness, she felt weightless, suspended in the void. A scream bubbled in her throat, but before it could escape, she hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her body, snapping the ice that had formed over her spirit. She gasped for breath, the oppressive darkness stifling her. The soil clung to her skin, thick and cold as though it was alive, writhing like worms beneath her fingertips. "Mommy, help!" Ellie's voice drifted to her from somewhere far away, a haunting echo that tugged at the threads of Sarah's despair. She struggled to her feet, disoriented, frantically scanning her dim surroundings. It felt as if the very air had a pulse, a slow, deliberate, predatory beat. The pit had transformed into a cavern, its walls glistening with a sinister sheen, reflecting the pulsating glow from above. Shadows slithered around her, whispering secrets in a language she could barely comprehend. They danced along the walls, writhing figures that resembled the Johnsons, their eyes glowing with malevolent glee. "Sarah," the voice camouflaged within the shadows. "Was it Ellie?" The sound was soft, yet sinister, coaxing her deeper into the cavernous grasp. "They are waiting for you, Ellie." she shouted, her voice echoing, trembling with desperation. She forced her body forward, hand trailing against the rough stone, moving toward the flickering light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heart. "Join us." The voices of the Johnsons chorused, swirling around her like a tempest. "We're family now, eternally bound." A sickening sensation tightened in her gut. Family? This was not family. The world outside screamed of warmth and safety, shattered by the darkness that threatened to consume her completely. Panic surged, urging her to run. But it wasn't just the fear of the Johnsons she felt, it was something larger, something that had ancient roots woven into this dark reality. She glanced around, eyes darting, filled with dread as a more significant horror pressed against the edges of her mind. In the distance, she spotted a narrow path illuminated by an otherworldly glow, surrounded by a swirling mist. Ellie's figure flickered in the light, a ghostly silhouette beckoning her closer. "Mommy, please." With newfound determination, Sarah pushed forward. Each step sent sharp jolts of pain coursing through her limbs as shadows clawed at her ankles, trying to drag her back into despair. She could hear their whispers growing louder, chaotic, like a storm before a disaster. "Come back, Sarah. You're one of us now." "No." She howled, battling the sound, refusing to give in. The shadows shrieked, the air crackling with rage. Then she heard it, the familiar laughter, the joy drained of innocence and twisted into something grotesque. Ellie's laughter echoed, mocking, weaving through the darkness, pulling Sarah closer to the pit of despair. "Mommy, don't be scared." The voice now resonated with something unholy, transforming. It was friends and family lost to the night, calling her to join them in their mourning. Driven by an instinct to protect her child, Sarah clenched her teeth and lunged toward the warm glow, the last fragment of hope flickering before her. But as she stepped into the light, the shadows screeched in unison, a cacophony of betrayal, the ground shook violently, swallowing her back into the darkness again. Heart hammering, Sarah fought against the encroaching fear, determination igniting within her. Could she truly save Ellie? Could she defy the darkness itself? "Get ready," the whispered voices faded, "for the reckoning awaits." As Sarah closed her eyes, a chilling realization gripped her. This was just the beginning. What if saving Ellie required a sacrifice greater than she was willing to give? An image surfaced in her mind, the truth behind the Johnsons' claim to their twisted family. And just like that, the shadows shifted, revealing a truth more horrifying than she could ever imagine. What price would she pay to shatter the bounds of darkness and reclaim her daughter? The darkness enveloped Sarah, wrapping around her like an old, tattered shroud, cold and damp, weighing down on her soul. She gasped, struggling to catch her breath, the remnants of hope slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The taste of soil was bitter and metallic, a constant reminder of where she was and the slim chance of escape. Mommy, Ellie's voice had shifted, it was no longer sweet, no innocence remained. It trembled with an unsettling resonance that chilled Sarah to her core. Back where it belongs, the cavern pulsed, the walls breathing with a hunger that matched her own rising dread. Shadows clamored around her, flickering in the dim light, a twisted mockery of familial smiles. They converged, their mouths stretched wide as they laughed, a sound riddled with malice. "Join us, Sarah." They cried in unison, a chorus that echoed in the void, chilling her blood. Each word slipped under her skin, igniting her nerves with pure terror. The darkness seemed to scoff at her courage, testing her resolve as it whispered promises of relief and refuge. She could feel her heart racing, the echo of fear pounding in her ears. The mist thickened, prickling her skin as if it were alive, trailing intrusive fingers around her neck. She fought against it, pushing harder toward where Ellie had beckoned. Panic surged, and behind her, the shadows howled, a cacophony urging her to give in. "Ellie!" The scream tore from her throat, desperate and raw. She stumbled, that glowing path flickering further away, like a cruel joke. But then a glimmer caught her eye. A crooked golden key hung from a gnarled tree branch twisted against the cavern wall. It sparkled with an allure that sang to her. Could it be the answer? "Take it." The voices cooed, luring her with promises that fanned the embers of her despair. You'll unlock the truth. Trembling, Sarah reached for the key. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a violent tremor rippled through the air, igniting a thunderous growl from the shadows. They screamed in unison, a wrathful tide crashing against her will. Turn back. They howled with fury. You will only bring doom upon yourself. The key pulsed between her fingers, radiating heat that felt almost comforting, yet still foreign. What would it unlock? Could it lead her to Ellie? She faced a crossroads, each choice darkened by the implications. Sarah Ellie's voice fell like rain, softening the chaos momentarily. Please, Mommy, it's hurting me. The plea sliced through her heart like glass. Panic surged, blending with rage at the grotesque darkness threatening to consume her child. In that split second, clarity steadied her trembling hands. I'll do anything, I'll face it all, she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. With resolve, she yanked the key from the branch. Shadows shrieked in protest, but she twisted frantically, seeking where it might fit. Suddenly, a door sprang to life beside her, ancient and cloaked in darkness. Hope surged, but terror lingered, thickening the air. What was behind that door? With one shaky breath, she pressed the key into the keyhole. The moment it turned, a chilling breeze whirled around her, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Viscous shadows writhed, preparing to push back, but she was done retreating. Ellie! I'm coming! As she flung open the door, a blinding light exploded forth. Shadows shrieked, thrashing around her in a chaotic ballet of fury. It was as if the entire cavern recognized the impending disruption, fighting to keep her from crossing that threshold, and just as she stepped through, an icy hand latched onto her ankle, dragging her back into the abyss. What awaited her now, back on the other side? Would she find Ellie, or had the shadows devised a fate more sinister? The door slammed shut behind her, and she could only stand frozen, the echoes of laughter falling into silence. What unspeakable truth had she unleashed, and what price would she now pay for her resolve? The light faded quickly, replaced by an oppressive darkness that swallowed Sarah whole once more. She gasped, her heart racing, her breaths quick and shallow as she realized she was not in the cavern anymore. Something was terribly off, her surroundings shifted. Gone were the twisted shadows and mocking laughter. Instead, she stood in a dimly lit hallway, lined with dilapidated doors, their paint peeling like old skin. The air was stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay. Flickering fluorescent lights above buzzed angrily, casting sickly shadows across the floor. Ellie? She whispered, her voice trembling, barely making a sound against the silence. The echo of her call hung in the air, piercing the stillness but met only with the distant shuffle of something moving. With little time to lose, she moved forward, her feet shuffling against the cold, damp floor. Each step felt like walking through treacle, the heavy atmosphere binding her limbs. The doors loomed ominously beside her, each adorned with strange symbols that sent a shiver of recognition down her spine, symbols she vaguely recalled from a nightmare. She paused at the first door, its surface marred by deep scratches. Hesitation crept in. The walls seemed to lean closer, as if listening, waiting. Memories of Ellie's voice rang in her ears, a haunting melody interwoven with cries of distress. Mommy, help me! What cruel game was being played? The key still clutched tightly in her hand felt molten hot, as if reacting to the panic tugging at her. She couldn't leave Ellie behind, that thought propelled her forward. With a deep breath, she threw open the first door. The hinges creaked, revealing a room draped in shadow, the air thick with an overwhelming gloom. Inside, shadows danced against the walls, flickering in and out like fleeting glimpses of a memory. An old, rusted metal chair stood in the center, secured by chains that clinked softly as if inviting her in. Mommy? Is that you? The voice trembled from within. It was clearer now, laced with both hope and despair. Sarah rushed in, but found no sign of her daughter. The room closed in on her, suffocating. Panic surged. Ellie! Where are you? The shadows hissed, coiling around her legs, tugging insistently. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The room darkened further. Join us, the whispers returned, and the sound was now unmistakably Ellie's voice threading through them. Mommy, back where it belongs, clutching the key tighter, she felt its warmth pulse against her palm, igniting a flicker of hope. She scanned the room, desperate for clues, when her gaze fell upon something shimmering in the corner, a small mirror, cracked and dusty, set against the wall. With a will forged in desperation, she approached. Peering into the glass, she did not see her reflection, but Ellie's face twisted in anguish, surrounded by a swirling storm of darkness. You have to unlock it, Mommy. You have to find me. Where? How? Sarah cried, but her voice faded, drowned out by the laughter of shadows closing in. Behind her, the whispers shifted now, louder and more distinct. Unlock the truth, unlock the door. Suddenly, it clicked, the cracked mirror was the portal. The key might fit here. With hands shaking uncontrollably, she inserted the key into the thin crack of the mirror. It felt wrong, intrusive, yet vital. Closing her eyes, she twisted it with resolve. The glass vibrated violently, sending crackles of light spiderwebbing across its surface. No. The shadows screeched, but it was too late. Light erupted, and she was yanked through, spinning. Sarah felt herself lose grasp on the world. When the world stopped whirling, she found herself back in darkness, but this time the echo of Ellie's laughter danced around her, not mocking, but encouraging, entwined with the sound of distant weeping. What reality had she stepped into now? Had she opened a door to save her daughter or unleashed another horror? A chilling realization dawned as the darkness coiled tighter around her, and she took a step back, terror clawing at her mind. What if Ellie was part of this darkness? What if she had become the very thing Sarah feared? The darkness felt alive, curling around her like a serpent ready to strike. Sarah's breath quickened, heart hammering against her ribcage. Voices chimed all around her, echoing Ellie's laughter mixed with something more sinister, a chorus of spirits long forgotten. They wailed softly, each cry laced with despair, tinged with malevolence. Mommy, help me, the voice rippled through the shadows, and in an eerie moment of clarity, she almost felt Ellie's small fingers brush against her own. Panic surged anew. This isn't right. Ellie! She shouted, more forcefully this time, desperation mixing with her resolve. She could feel the whispers growing louder, swirling around her in a tempest of sounds, turning anger into a physical force. She had to find her daughter. The key pulsed in her palm, its warmth now unsettling. What do you want from me? She shouted into the abyss, her voice barely piercing the overwhelming noise. Silence fell, thick and oppressive, and she felt a cold breath sweep past her ear. Unlock the truth. It wasn't just the shadows. It was something deeper. Something that craved her attention, her understanding. The shadows trembled, waiting. She glimpsed flickers of movement, forms just out of sight taunting her with their haunting calls. Her eyes darted around, scanning for something she might be missed. Ellie! She yelled, her voice breaking. If you can hear me, please, I'm coming. In the midst of that choking darkness, a glimmer caught her attention, another door, only slightly ajar at the end of the long hallway. It was different from the others, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. Sarah hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But the memory of Ellie's laughter sparked a flicker of courage. She stepped toward the door, its creaking hinges echoing like a warning. The light spilled outward, illuminating dust motes swirling through the oppressive air. As she reached for the doorknob, her heart raced with a blend of hope and fear. With a deep breath, she opened the door. Inside lay a room filled with mundane objects, furniture, toys, a small desk piled high with crayon drawings. At first glance, it looked like Ellie's room, but there was something wrong. The familiar felt twisted. The colors were muted, washed out as if they sat in perpetual twilight. Mommy, over here. Ellie's voice rang out again. It felt more real here, but also laced with an unnatural echo. Sarah stepped hesitantly inside, every instinct wary. The light flickered again, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. She moved toward a small table where a stuffed toy sat, gazing up at her with glassy eyes. It was Ellie's favorite bear, but there was a rip in its side, oozing a dark, viscous substance that smelled of rot. "Ellie, where are you?" she croaked, feeling dread creep down her spine. The laughter faded, replaced by frantic whispers. "Help me. Mommy." The urgency gripped Sarah's heart like a vice. She scanned the room, this distorted mirror of her daughter's life, until something cold brushed against her leg. She jumped, spinning around, heart in her throat, and there the figure remained shrouded in shadow. Hunched over and small, it raised its head slowly. The dim light caught glimpses of familiar features, a face eerily similar to her daughter's but warped by despair. "Mommy, you opened the door." The voice, now layered with something else, chilled Sarah to the core. "You shouldn't have come here." A nervous energy surged within her limbs. "Ellie. Mommy, come play with us." "Play." The shadows surrounding the figure swirled to life, coalescing into multiple forms, all bearing indistinct faces, eyes hollow and hungry. "Leave her alone!" she screamed, adrenaline surging, just as every door in the room slammed shut, trapping her inside this twisted version of her daughter's sanctuary. The figure stepped closer, nose scrunching up in a playful yet sinister grin. "You shouldn't have opened that door, Mommy." Now the games really begin. The darkness pulsed with energy, and Sarah felt an icy grip around her heart as the shadows slithered ever closer. What would it take to save Ellie now? And was she too late? The syllables of the sinister chant filled the air once more, echoing in her mind, "Join us, join us." The laughter echoed louder, a cacophony that clawed at Sarah's mind. The shadowy figures converged around her, their faces shifting, flickering like dying flames. Cold sweat drenched her skin, and her stomach twisted into knots. She had opened the door. She had stepped into a nightmare. "Ellie!" she cried, but it came out as a whisper, swallowed whole by the taunting shrieks of the otherworldly forms. Panic carved fresh lines into her face as they drew closer. They were playing, but not like she remembered. This was a game of life and death, and she was the prey. "Help me. Mommy." The voice rang out, clear and sharp. It pierced through the shadows, but it wasn't Ellie's. The realization sank into her like lead. Where was Ellie? The toys began to twitch, almost as if they were alive. The bear, twisted by shadows, made a small noise, a gurgling, spluttering sound like it was choking on its own stuffing. She staggered back, colliding with something clammy behind her. With a quick glance, she spotted a figure even darker than the rest, looming silently in the corner. Its hollow gaze fixed on her, a void of malevolence. "Playtime." It hissed, and the shadows danced, swirling around her like a storm. She turned, desperately searching for the exit, her mind racing. There had to be a way out. The oppressive darkness pressed in, closing the gap, suffocating her hope. "Unlock the truth." The words whispered again. What truth? What did she need to unlock? With trembling hands, she fished out the key from her pocket. It pulsed with heat, but as she held it, the temperature in the room plummeted. The whispers shifted into a chant, a rhythm that could shake the bones of the living. Join us, join us. Her heart reacted instinctively, thrumming in her chest as she raised the key, desperate to make sense of the chaos around her. What truth? She shouted. What do you want from me? The shadow beings slowed, their faces merging into one grotesque visage, pulling at her with phantom fingers. Find us, they cooed in eerie unison, their voices intertwining, reverberating off the walls. The truth will set her free. She clutched the key closer, her knuckles white, feeling the rage of maternal instinct surge through her. She wouldn't let Ellie be lost. Not like this. Tell me where she is. She screamed, and the room shuddered. The shadows recoiled for a moment, forming a distorted circle before converging again. The faces morphed, each one more twisted than the last, and a chilling laugh erupted from the center. Find the truth or join us forever. The word struck her like a thunderbolt, freezing her in place. Join you? She repeated, her gut tightening. She felt herself being pulled toward the mass of shadows, her feet seemingly rooted to the ground. It was as if they were weaving a web around her, drawing her in. Fighting against the growing weight of despair, she turned her gaze toward the dim light filtering through the cracks of the remaining door. If it hadn't been completely sealed, maybe suddenly, a cry pierced through the din. Mommy. Help me. It was Ellie. But her voice was distant, fading away fast in a rush of darkness. Hold on, Ellie. I'm coming. Sarah yelled, lunging toward the exit, dragging against the pull of the shadows. She could almost feel Ellie's small hands slipping away, the finality of their separation tightening around her heart like a vice, the chanting crescendoed, echoing off the walls. Shadows lashed out, curling around her, framing her like a tragic dance. Pain shot through her, dragging her back, but she wouldn't give in. With a fierce cry, she threw herself toward the door. Would the key unlock the way? Would it bring her daughter back from the brink? As she collided with the door, darkness engulfed her, and she screamed. Would she find Ellie before it was too late? And what truth awaited them if she did? The shadows danced cruelly, whispering their macabre invitation once more. The impact of her body crashing against the door sent waves of energy through the threshold. In that blinding moment of darkness and sound, adrenaline surged through Sarah as she clenched the key, feeling it searing like a flame. She shoved her shoulder against the door, forcing it with every ounce of strength she had left. The shadows screamed. A guttural roar reverberated through the room, shaking the very bones of the structure. They surged toward her, a tidal wave of black, hungry for her essence, eager to snatch her into their twisted realm. Unlock it. A shadow voice shrieked, piercing her mind with sharp, splintering fear. Unlock the truth before it's too late. Her breath was ragged. Her pulse hammered in her ears. What truth? She shot back, desperation clawing at her throat. In that instant, a flicker of light burst through the cracks of the door. It grew, illuminating the edges of the room, illuminating shadows that wilted away before its intensity. There was a faint but unmistakable silhouette emerging in the light. Ellie? Was that really her daughter? Mommy. The voice was clearer now, filled with a desperate plea that shattered her resolve. Hold on, baby. I'm coming. She turned back to the door, her heart racing furiously. She raised the key, the glowing warmth pulsing through her fingers, and drove it into the lock. The sound of gears grinding against one another echoed in the hollow space. Shadows circled her like wolves, growling, but she ignored them, focusing on the lock. Open, open. She whispered, a mantra of pure need. With a deafening crack, the key turned, and the door flew wide open, spilling light into the suffocating void. The darkness writhed, screeching in protest, but Sarah had already stepped through, propelled by the urgency of her daughter's call. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the oppressive chamber she had just traversed. It was bright, but eerie, with walls made of an unrecognizable material that shimmered in hazy colors. It felt otherworldly, yet all too real. Ellie. Where are you? Her voice echoed through the strange space, returning to her like a cruel reminder of her solitude. Not far away, she spotted more toys stacked high, their lifeless forms marred by dirt and dust. But one thing among them stood out, a tattered doll, its wide eyes peering into her very soul, showcasing a fear that mirrored her own. Moving toward it, she reached out, her fingers trembling. But before she could touch it, a rattling laughter erupted behind her, sending chills coursing down her spine. The shadows were upon her again, surging like an army of phantoms. Join us. Join the play. No. Sarah screamed, spinning around to face the fear that loomed closer, its gaping maw ready to engulf her. That wasn't Ellie's laughter, it was something darker, something mocking. As she stood there, paralyzed by terror, a thought crashed into her mind, the truth the shadows whispered of. What if Ellie wasn't just lost? What if Mommy? The cry rang out once more, now distorted, echoing off the walls, as if it was coming from every direction. "Help me!" But was it really Ellie? Or had the shadows twisted her voice, weaving a trap so irresistible, she'd walk right into their embrace? No more games! Sarah yelled defiantly, clutching the key like a lifeline. "I will find my daughter." The shadows retreated slightly, as if taken aback by her ferocity. They murmured among themselves, their voices swirling around her in an unsettling cacophony, urging her to surrender. "Unlock the truth," they hissed in a choir, their voices converging into a deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath her feet. As her heart raced, she felt the key grow heavy once more, pulsing with an unknown energy. Was she ready to confront the truth? Would it set them free, or was it a door that would seal their fates forever? "Sarah! Mommy!" The call came again, a ghost of its former self. This time, she braced herself. She had to know. She had to find out what truth lay waiting in the depths of this nightmare. With a desperate resolve, she stepped deeper into the glowing light, forcing herself toward the haunting echoes of Ellie's voice. But as she did, a shadow lunged at her from the side, baring teeth that shimmered with otherworldly hunger. Could she wrestle the truth from the dark? Or would she succumb to the shadows, just another player lost in the game? Sarah staggered back as the shadow lunged, its teeth snapping just inches from her face. The energy of the key pulsed in her hand, almost as if it were trying to guide her. She tightened her grip and forced herself to look deeper into the fray of shadows. They were shifting and swirling, their forms undulating in a grotesque dance that made her stomach twist. "Ellie!" She shouted again, her voice rising above the eerie chaos. The shadows hissed, recoiling at the sound of her desperation. But with each moment, they seemed to grow stronger, feeding off her fear. "Join us!" they whispered, the voices slithering inside her mind. "Let the play begin." Panic washed over her, but she couldn't let them win. She took a breath, one deep enough to stoke the embers of hope buried beneath her terror. She would fight, even against the tide of encroaching darkness that clamored for her. "I will find you, Ellie." Suddenly, the air around her shifted. The light from the doorway glimmered with renewed strength, and the key in her hand began to glow even brighter, illuminating the surrounding shadows. The oppressive weight of despair lessened slightly. It was as if the very essence of her determination fed the light, dispelling the shadow's claws that were reaching for her. The doll caught her eye again. It stood there, seemingly alive, its glassy eyes pleading with her. The fear in those eyes mirrored her own, but there was something else, an invitation. Just as she stepped forward, the laughter erupted again, louder and more chaotic. "Mommy! Help!" Ellie's voice echoed, this time more distorted, the sweetness replaced by a chilling mockery. "No!" Sarah shouted. Was it really her daughter? What if the darkness meant to ensnare her with these sounds? Tears stung her eyes. She didn't have the luxury of doubt, not now. With a sudden resolve, she turned back to face the shadows. "I'm not afraid of you!" She screamed into the abyss, feeling the weight of her fear give way to a surge of defiance. "Tell me what you want. Why do you want Ellie?" The shadows paused, their movements stuttering, as if her words had struck a chord. "Unlock the truth," they murmured, swirling more frantically now. "Truth?" she echoed, realization dawning. She had to discover what lay behind the locked doors of her mind. With every ounce of willpower, she approached the glowing doll, the weight of the key heavy in her grasp. In that moment, the darkness surged again, intensifying, growing furious at her defiance. "Play with us!" they screamed, the rage amplifying around Sarah like a storm, but she had no time to retreat. If her daughter was trapped in this wicked game, she needed to change the rules. Aligned with the pulsing energy of the key, Sarah pressed her palm against the doll's surface, hoping it would unlock something more than just memories. It might reveal a way to her daughter. The instant her skin connected with the fabric, a shock coursed through her, harsh and electric. The world shook, and suddenly her surroundings melted away like an oil painting in the rain. With a jolt, she found herself back in the hallway of her house, not far from the basement door, the place she had been so afraid to enter, the place where everything had fallen apart. The familiar scent of her home clashed with the heavy tang of dread as she took a hesitant step toward the door, but as she approached, the floorboards creaked ominously, and Ellie's voice rang out once more. "Help me, Mommy." The sadness, the fear, it was real, heart pounding. She grasped the doorknob, knowing whatever lay behind it would change everything. Was she ready to confront the nightmares that haunted this place? "Ellie!" Sarah called, bracing herself for whatever lay behind that threshold. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. But then, a soft whisper fluttered from the other side, "Do you really want to know?" The dread clawed at her throat as she twisted the knob, caught between her determination and the suffocating air of uncertainty. What awaited inside could either save her or seal them both in darkness forever. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit basement filled with dust and echoes of forgotten memories. The scent of mildew attacked her senses, but beneath that was a sharper, metallic tang, raising the hair on her arms. Heart pounding, she stepped down, feet shuffling against the worn steps. "Ellie! Are you down here?" No response. Only silence met her desperate pleas. Anxiety knotted tighter in her chest as she pictured her daughter trapped in some corner, terror washing over her fragile form. "I'm coming for you. Hold on." Sarah glanced around, the beam of her phone illuminating the walls. Old photos hung, their surfaces yellowed and peeling. The faces staring back were locked in happiness, ominous against the encroaching gloom lurking in every shadow. She swallowed hard, urging her legs to move. Just a moment longer, she whispered to herself, then she felt it, the unmistakable chill of something breathing nearby, crawling along her skin. A shadow loomed at the end of the room, thick and dense, warping the light behind it. Panic flared in her chest. "Ellie!" She screamed, voice breaking against the weight of despair. A flicker caught her eye. First, a stuffed bear lay forgotten in a corner, then another glimpse, the tiniest flash of pink, a dress, her daughter's dress. Turmoil surged through her. She raced across the room, fighting to grasp every single fiber of hope. "My baby!" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she snatched the dress, clutching it to her heart. The fabric was soaked in something wet and dark, and in that moment, all hope crumbled. She gripped the bear tight, its form felt familiar but cold, absent of the warmth and glow her daughter brought into her life. Sarah dropped to her knees, balling the dress and bear against her chest. "Please, please, where are you?" She croaked, anguish razor-sharp in her throat. No answer, only the shadows swirling around her, taunting her with echoes of laughter. "Unlock the truth." The voices whispered, sinister and mocking. "Find her, but how?" What was the truth? Then it hit her, a realization ignited. The key. She scrambled to her feet, scrambling through her frenzied thoughts. The key, the one she had gripped so tightly, still glowed faintly in her palm. She rushed toward a small door tucked behind the shelves, a door she'd never noticed before. With shaky hands, she slid the key into the lock, heart racing as she twisted it. The door creaked open, revealing a cavernous room, suffused with an unearthly light. The air crackled, laden with a magnetic energy, drawing her forward in a trance. At the center stood a shadowy figure, the outline of a girl, Ellie. "Mommy." The voice was sweet but layered with a haunting echo, intertwining both innocence and something darker, a memory and a nightmare manifested. "Ellie." Tear-streaked, Sarah dashed forward, but a wall of shadows erupted, rising to form a barrier. "No." Panic surged anew. "Let her go." She beat the air, pushing past the claws that reached for her, oppressive and thick. "Join us," the shadows hissed, drowning her in the fear that spiraled through her core. "Embrace the truth, be free." "Ellie!" She shouted, resolute. The shadows quaked at her fury, and with renewed courage, she called upon the memories of their fun whooping as they danced together in the kitchen, of sunny summers filled with laughter. Suddenly, the key pulsed brightly in her palm. The shadows dwindled, shrinking back, their grasp loosening around her as she pressed forward. "You're stronger than this." The light from the key swirled, cutting through the darkness. She plunged into the rush of energy, feeling the shadows dissipate, until she could finally see Ellie clearer now, a bright spark within the murky depths. "Mommy! Hurry!" The rush of energy propelled her forward, breaking the cage of shadows, the very essence forcing them back as she raced toward her daughter. In one swift motion, she threw herself at Ellie, wrapping her arms around her shivering frame. "I got you, babe. You're safe." But as soon as she embraced her daughter, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The shadows retaliated, squealing in rage. They surged forward, convulsing, ready to claim their prize. "No!" Sarah shouted, channeling every ounce of love and ferocity into her voice. "Get away from us!" As her fierce declaration echoed, the key flared brightly. A surge of light erupted around them, and in that moment, Sarah understood, the truth was not something to be unlocked, but embraced. Their love was the key, the connection more potent than the darkest shadow. The blinding light scattered the shadows like dust in a storm. With one determined push, Sarah pulled Ellie closer. It was now or never. "We are free," she shouted, looking deep into her daughter's eyes. The light enveloped them, an explosion of warmth and strength, then came silence. The oppressive darkness shattered, banished to nothingness as they spun together, a whirlwind of breath and laughter. When the world came back into focus, they stood in their own backyard, illuminated by the glow of the moon. Everything looked the same, yet felt profoundly different, a deep sense of relief washing over them. Mommy Ellie's voice was soft, innocent, back in familiar territory, yet tinged with a wisdom far beyond her years. "Did we win?" "Yes, baby." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "We did. We are safe now." In that moment, they shared a warmth, a healing bond forged in the shadows, and emerged into a new dawn, the sun rising on the horizon, and just like that, they reclaimed their life. No ghosts, only love guiding their journey from that day forward. As they embraced, the memories gave way to laughter, filling the air with hope, a promise that no darkness could ever sever. Now, as you've journeyed through Sarah's dark tale, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss these exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep this channel thriving. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. You won't want to miss the next adventure.